want to stress these guys are like, these dogs are literally ultra marathon runners. Like I've seen, the classic herding, the healer, the border collie, who's got all this energy. And then I saw these dogs and I'm like, this is a whole different level.
Hey everyone, I'm your host, Courtney Post, and this is Let's Vet Together by Suvetto, a show where we'll be highlighting stories of growth, ownership, and well-being in the veterinary industry and having real conversations about how we can make veterinary medicine better for everyone. If this is your first time listening, welcome. We're glad you're here. If you've already been a part of our community, make sure to follow us on whatever platform you're listening from and give us a review to let us know how we're doing. We really appreciate you for coming back. Welcome to Let's Vet Together. I'm so excited today to be sitting down again with Dr. Russell Miller, my friend and owner of Vovets. And also he can add to his resume, staff veterinarian to the Iditarod. And today we're going to talk about that experience, Russ. We've already done this once about what you could possibly expect to anticipate. How do you prepare for that life-changing event? And today is hearing actually how it went and what you walked away with and all your crazy stories. So welcome back to the podcast. And let's start there. Tell us from the beginning what it was like flying into Alaska.
Well, I want to start and saying thank you for letting me come back and to tell this part of the story. It was a phenomenal opportunity experience. It was a 2-week adventure. The first week flying into Anchorage and being teamed up with essentially other veterinarians. And the first week is really designed to cover the continuing education section. The continuing education section is learning about the different diseases or situations that you could find yourself in. And those diseases could be like, for example, rhabdomyolysis or laceration repairs, cardiac conditions. And that continuing education opportunity allowed, we don't see a lot of certain diseases down here in Fort Worth, Texas that you would see necessarily up there, but there was a lot of similarities. And it was cool to be able to learn about even like ER, GP, some of the things that they experience up there that we can utilize down here. So the first few days, we're doing the continuing education. We're going out with the other veterinarians to do physical exams on all these sled dogs, and also getting the chance to meet the different mushers. Yeah. And being my first time going out there, not necessarily sure what am I getting myself into? What is this? What is the relationships? And to see the bond, the love that those mushers have for those dogs. And, you're doing literally like so many physical exams and you're asking them, hey, how's your dog doing? What are things you're seeing? And they're like, hey, I'm this pup here may have like a little abrasion on his paw. Is there any recommendations, or this is something we should be concerned about? And just to develop those relationships and learn the difference, I guess, things that you'd be treating and diagnosing up there is pretty cool.
Just to back up for non-Iditarod listeners, a musher is the driver of the dog sled. This is the owner of the dogs. Do they own all of the dogs, or is it like horse racing where you may have someone else who owns the dog and someone else who's racing the horse? Like how does that work, Russ?
To my best understanding, the majority of them own all their dogs. Now, occasionally, those mushers are friends with each other. And if, 1 year a musher's not racing, essentially, what they'll do is they'll have another musher, another friend go through and actually race their dogs.
Oh, wow.
So
okay. And so teams of how many dogs? How many dogs were on each team?
Yeah. So you can have up to 16 dogs on a team.
Wow.
And you have to cross the finish line with 6 dogs. That's a must.
Interesting. So along the way, if your dog became ill or has an injury, which I certainly want to hear about your treatment of some of these and how you moved along with the race itself. But you can actually finish the race with less dogs than you started with. And in most cases, that always happens.
Yeah, it's promoted because you think of it. So they start in Anchorage as they're coming across the different checkpoints, and how we got to those checkpoints, because you're not taking roads. You're flying in. And so a group of us veterinarians, trail crew, the communications group flew into a location where I was McGrath. And when we flew in and we're setting up a location the day before the dogs are coming through at that checkpoint, that was an awesome opportunity to actually meet people from across the U.S. Example, one of the trail crew volunteers was actually finishing her PhD in Michigan right now, and something that's completely non-veterinary related, but she just loves the dogs and loves volunteering.
Yeah.
So we set up for the checkpoints, and as the first team that I got to interact with, you've got your dogs that come across, and one of the dogs was actually in the sled, and I'm like, that's interesting. And I walked up and I asked him, and he said, this pup here, she's off. She's a little bit slower. She's not feeling her best. And we're going to go through and say, hey, what's best for the dogs? And essentially what he did is he was on the trail. You're only as fast as your slowest runner, essentially. Sure. And he pulled the team aside, put the dog directly in the sled, brought it to the next checkpoint. And at that point, he went through, signed over care over to us, and then he went on with his team. So
that is a new Iditarod fact for me. I didn't know that along the way, you just might have dogs on your team that fall out. So it makes total sense. And obviously even more important for the veterinary team to be there to care for that animal at that time. So
when those return dogs, essentially it's all about the dogs, it's doing what's best for them. But if a pup's not feeling well, or let's say they're developing stress-induced diarrhea, or they're just not their fullest ability, it's best to automatically stop, bring them to the next checkpoint. At that checkpoint, we do our physical exams. We provide necessary medications for them, and then they have volunteer airplanes that will take them back to Anchorage. Oh my gosh. So we've got veterinarians throughout the entire trail. You have critical care veterinarians that volunteer as well. And the whole point is just making sure that they get the care they need.
Amazing. Okay. So we have one dog that came in on a sled, not feeling her best self. Mm-hmm. Medically, what else did you see, Russ?
Medically, it was very fortunate. I honestly just saw some dogs are just tired, a little bit tired, or they're having a little bit of diarrhea. Sure. There was a couple dogs that passed through that had what's called rhabdomyolysis. Essentially, when you're running and you have like muscle that's starting to break down a little bit, or they get too hot. When you're running the Iditarod, the ideal temperatures are usually below 0 degrees. You want to run the cooler temperatures. So as dogs are just running, they're producing a lot of heat. And we were fortunate enough that the temperatures were a little warmer than usual. And that does make it a little bit concerning, because the temperature's a little bit warmer. The dogs, when they're running, will actually reach down and grab the snow.
Oh, sure.
So to cool themselves down.
Sure.
And if you have that over and over, you worry about, okay, could they potentially get like an aspiration pneumonia?
Just all that water going in. Mm-hmm.
So when they come in for the checkpoint and you're doing your physical exams, you're listening to the heart, the lungs. Do you hear anything? Are they coughing? Are they sneezing? And that's another thing, because the mushers are like, hey, doc, they are so in tune with their dogs. They're like, can you come look at my dog real quick? And you may have looked at like 30 minutes ago, an hour ago. Hey, I want you to look again. Just verify. I've got videos of these dogs, like they are so eager to run that they had to put mandatory like 24-hour checkpoints of stopping and resting the dogs. Which is great, because
it's great, but it's like a kid waiting to like go outside and play in the snow for the first time. They're, just behind the door, ready to go.
Mm-hmm. You're exactly right.
Wild. Well, we would love to include some of your video, on the website and when we post the podcast. So if anyone wants to check out, we'll put it on the YouTube link too. So that would be really fun for folks to see some of that footage, Russ.
Veterinary students, are you ready to take ownership of your future? If so, kickstart your career as a doctor with Harbor Go. Go, or Graduation to Ownership, is an all-new veterinary business fellowship designed to fast-track your growth as a doctor and as a practice leader. Master your clinical skills and learn the intricacies of practice ownership in a 2-year experiential learning journey unlike any other. So whether you do it now or after you listen to this podcast, Visit harbor.vet/go and get going toward the veterinary career of your dreams.
So what did you personally walk away with? Like, what was this like from a personal development kind of a moment that you're stepping outside of your day to day, not going into your practice every day and kind of, the bustle of your team and your life and your clients, that you're really, again, in a place you've never been,
Yep.
doing something you've never been, and probably having, I would imagine you were busy, but probably not at the pace that you work at every day.
Correct. A big thing I took from that, and I find myself consistently saying this, is becoming comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Fly in, you're in the middle of nowhere. Like, I don't have the appropriate type of cell phone service, satellite service that they have there.
Right.
Most of those locations don't have Wi-Fi, besides what the comms team needs. So like, it's shutting down all social media with your personal social media, personal contacts and such. And it allowed for me just to really reflect back on what's important to me,
mm-hmm.
my family, and like my future goals, whether that's personal goals or goals with Bo.
Yeah.
That was a pretty good opportunity just to shut everything down and just see, what do I want as a person, as
Sure.
a veterinarian? Yeah.
Where were your moments of struggle? Where did in that 2 weeks, did you have those moments that you're like, okay, this is hard for me, or I'm ready to go home, or I'm frustrated? Like, where did you find your moments of struggle?
Sure. As a veterinarian, in, let's say, practicing there in as I say, the lower 48s, right? As my everyday, like practicing in the clinic, there are times when I like find myself in control of the situation. I control like how I treat and treat cases or work them up, and if I'm flexible with clients, and I feel like I have way more control in my everyday. But when I'm out there, like, it's being very, okay, well, this is the obstacle here. This is what our options are. And I just need to go with the flow of it and then see what the best outcome is.
As a fellow control freak, that would be very hard for me too, Russ. That's what I'm hearing you say. So, but there's something really also freeing about that, when you can accept that you are not in control of the situation, and yet you can respond to it, but you don't have to control it. So that's, I recognize that would have been a challenge for me as well. So.
For sure.
What did you bring home? What souvenirs
I brought home?
Yeah.
Memories is one of the number one, like photos, videos, a lot of, like, I try not to be a huge materialistic individual.
Yeah.
Like, I've got a couple coffee cups, and I've got a patch, and for the Iditarod.
Nice.
For me, it's a lot of the memories.
Do you have any pictures up in the practice? Are you going to have like some really awesome picture of you with all the mushers, or you with some dog in a sled team that you're going to put up in practice?
You bring up a good question about the pictures, because there was, at one point, I did have a little bit of Wi-Fi, and I got an email from the practice manager, and she said, hey, there is an elementary school in Ohio that every year they put on their own little, essentially Iditarod, in their elementary school. So they go through and they'll take this stuffed animal, dog, husky, and they will hide it somewhere in the school, and the students will find the dog. And then the students get to go through and, like, essentially say which mushers are their mushers, and ask, essentially following them throughout the trail. And this teacher had asked me, she goes, do you mind answering some general questions? I was like, I do. So it came out, and I answered some general questions, like, for example, somebody was like, do the dogs get veterinary care? And I was like, you bet, the dogs get veterinary care, and they get fed multiple times a day, and so forth. And then one of them was like, my favorite musher is Jed. And I looked over, and I was like, that's Jed.
Oh, right? Wow.
I walked over, and I was like, hey, buddy, I was like, I explained the situation to him, and I was like, these kids are absolutely, they love what we're doing up here. And I was like, do you mind if we get a photo together, and I'll send it back to the school? And he's like, I'll do it for the kids.
Oh, that's awesome. That is awesome. So were you at the finish, Russ?
I was not at the finish.
Okay.
So right at the very beginning, I got to see the start of the race, and was able to go through and be right about the third of the way.
Okay. And did you work with the person who won? And I remember reading this, so refresh my memory, that I think, were they third generation Iditarod winners?
If I recall correctly, if I remember right, his grandfather is the quote unquote father of the Iditarod.
Oh, wild.
That he was the original. So yeah.
And did you get to work with him or any other of the kind of key, the winners, like whoever placed, kind of in the top? Just curious if there is a different dynamic between the experience level or the excellence level. Like, what did you see from an athlete perspective or from the strategy of these mushers?
So every musher has a little bit different strategy. It'll vary depending on the weather. Is it snowing? How cold it is? How warm it is? And when the mushers are competing in the race, there's really three primary goals they have, and they can pick from: to compete, to finish the race, to be in the top 10, or to try to win the race. And each musher has similar but a little bit different plans. And of course, strategies are varying depending on the different obstacles that they come across. So I would say the top the top 5 mushers may have taken their 24-hour checkpoints farther on versus mushers who are taking more time or needing more time to complete the race. Those are the ones they interact with. And even the mushers that are just there, they love it, they want to finish the race, like the quality care that they're providing their dogs is amazing.
That's part of the experience. It's not just about winning it. I mean, it's like there are folks that win marathons, and there are folks that can say they've completed a marathon. And the Iditarod is that, in different mindset that you have going into it.
I want to stress, these dogs are literally ultra marathon runners. Like, I've seen, the classic herding, the healer, the border collie, who's got all this energy. And then I saw these dogs and I'm like, this is a whole different level. Like
a whole different level. How many times a day do they eat to keep that level up?
That's a great question.
Yeah. I
know I recall it's 3 times a day. I mean, they're going 10,000 calories a day.
Oh, I'm sure. That's wild. Where did you sleep, Russ? Were you cold?
I was in a very fortunate opportunity, very fortunate. When we flew into McGrath, we actually had a log cabin.
Oh, nice.
That doesn't happen very often. I got very lucky. That was like a lottery of getting that location.
With that checkpoint that you got, just to clarify, it's because you got that checkpoint, you had a log cabin. There were veterinarians with different checkpoints that got a tent.
They slept outside.
Oh my gosh.
And my location of that log cabin, it's essentially, I'm more than happy to share some photos of that. It has essentially bunk beds. Yeah. So the for the first few days we were there, we're sleeping in bunk beds. But when the dogs are coming in, they're coming in at 8:00 in the morning, 2:00 in the afternoon, 2 in the morning. So at that point you are on shifts, rotating back and forth with the other veterinarians. So, and we've gone out, we've checked on all the dogs. We're using GPS trackers to watch the teams come in. And I was like, well, we're not going to see a dog for another hour. And I've done literally, I don't know how many physical exams on all these dogs. So I'm going to go sleep in that corner over there. And they're like, okay.
Says the experienced ER doctor.
Yeah.
Dr. Russ Miller knows how to catch sleep when he needs to.
That's right. And then be like, just wake me up. And if I snore, don't worry about it.
So will you do it again? What is the experience? Is this a next year? Is it, 10 years from now, I want to do it again? What's the veterinarians that you worked with? How many of them were repeat to the program, and what's your plans?
I was fortunate. There are, only a handful of rookies usually accepted. Most people, once they go out there, they've experienced it, they've said, yes, this is for me. Most of them are for life. They come back every year. I 100% am going to apply for this summer to be able to go back again. So for us, the application is accepted, and they were more than happy with the work we were doing out there. So
very exciting. Very exciting. What's the one thing that you wish you would have done different? Do you look back and you're like, oh, I wish I did that, or I wish I did this differently?
Sure. I got to say, they did a really good job preparing us with equipment and such. And their pretty transparent on the different things that could occur when you're out there. I don't have a whole lot that I would do different.
Great. No regrets. I mean, that's the best way to come back.
Next year, if I can find a way to do it, go longer than 2 weeks.
All right. That's fair. Not enough time.
Yeah, not enough time.
Yeah. We're at Vovets coming to you from Alaska soon enough. The 10-year plan.
Maybe.
This was awesome, Russ. Thank you. Thank you for sharing this experience with us. And I can't wait to see some pictures and videos. Please send them over. And someday when you go back, we have to do a live recording from Alaska. That's sure. My dream for the Let's Vet Together podcast.
Okay. And then again, if there's any veterinarians that are interested more in the Iditarod, please feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Yes. And Russ is available. Obviously, his contact information we'll provide, but anyone else that would ever be interested in volunteering. And it sounds like non-veterinarians can volunteer as well.
Oh, it's completely, there's so many non-veterinarians up there volunteering. So what
a really great experience.
Yeah. And I met a lot of technicians up there as well. So
that's awesome. Talk about a growth opportunity, right? As part of our Suvato pillars, you can put a check mark in your growth box for the year. You did it, Russ.
Thanks.
It was great seeing you. Thank you.
Thank you.